Welcome to the recorded lesson on the English language paper 2 question 4. There is a little bit of building work going on outside the window whilst I'm recording this. Hopefully that won't get in the way of things too much, but please excuse that extraneous noise. Let's have a look at paper 2 question 4. This is what it looks like. It's 16 marks that are available for this question. Probably you're going to end up spending a little bit longer than 16 minutes on it, but somewhere between 16 to 20 minutes is what you should be reckoning on. As always, the same reminder, it is crucial that you do not go over time on any single question because that will rob time from later questions, in this case paper 2 question 5, where any extra marks you gain on question 4 by spending a bit of extra time, you will sacrifice far more marks than that from those higher tariff questions. Just as a reminder, we're looking at a past paper with the Aberfan and earthquake sources. Do go back to paper 2 question 1 if you want a little general review of how this exam paper is set out. Right, let's look in a bit of detail at what you are being asked to do here. The first thing to say is it feels like there's a lot to do. Because first of all, we've been asked to compare both sources. You need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. So already it's feeling like there's a lot to do. You have to talk about the ideas the writers are conveying. You have to talk about the perspectives of the two writers, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the difference between those two things. You need to pull out the methods that the writers are using. You need to support your methods with quotes, so references from both of the texts. And of course, you need to talk about the effects of those methods and quotes, as always. And we get told that here when it says how they convey their ideas and perspectives. So what are the effects of the methods and the quotes that they are using? Wowee, there is a lot to do in this question, and we've only got somewhere between 16 minutes and 20 minutes to do it. What do we need? Well, it feels like we need a formula. You may have already listened to the lesson on paper 1 question 4. I said the same thing there. This question is not difficult, it is complicated. There is complexity to it. There is a lot to do, but as long as you have a formula, then the individual things you are being asked to do are not necessarily that difficult. In fact, they're all things that you've been tested on previously in the English language papers. In the earlier questions, it's just you're now being asked to do a whole bunch of them at the same time. But trust in the formula. If you've got a good formula, all will be well. Okay. The main reason why students do poorly on this question is that they think that when the question talks about ideas and perspectives, that they are talking about the same thing. They are not talking about the same thing. Ideas and perspectives are different. Have a look at these two pictures. What's the difference between them? I'm going to give you a few seconds on that before going on to the next slide. Let's think about this cartoon first, which has someone on a desert island who sees a boat in the distance and is relieved that finally a boat has come to rescue them and shouts out "boat." And then we have the person in the boat who sees land, having been adrift no doubt for many, many days, throws their arms up in celebration, proclaiming that land has been found. This cartoon is all about perspectives. When we use the word perspective, what we are talking about is what position is a writer writing from? What is their point of reference? What is their point of view? These people in the cartoon have very different perspectives. They are telling their story, if you like, from a very different point of view or perspective. Because they are telling their story from a different point of view or perspective, what they write and how they write their story is going to be very, very different. Now, when we talk about perspectives, this might be a physical perspective, so where physically is somebody telling their story from, but it also might be psychological. And let's have a look at a few different examples. It might be that someone has a passive role in something. In other words, their physical presence in the thing that is happening is not really there. They are an outside observer. They are being unintrusive. They are being impartial. Their role is passive. Or it might be that they are directly involved in the action themselves, that they're intrusive. Perhaps they're emotionally connected. Sorry, that's not a physical position, that's a psychological position. I'll talk about that next. So there might be different physical perspectives or points of view from which a writer is writing. If we think about an example, let's say you're reading something about a gig, a music festival. If the writer is somebody who is getting up on the day of the music festival, is very, very excited, is getting on a train, is surrounded by fellow music fans, is arriving in some field in the middle of nowhere, trudging across this field with all their equipment in arms, amongst the throng of festival goers, setting up their camp and then heading off to the festival. That writer is actively involved in what is happening. Another writer might be there as a member of the press, and maybe they've been driven in, they've gone up to some kind of hospitality box somewhere, and they are watching the crowds emerge from the train station from a distance elevated above them, and what they describe is observing these people and their activities. Well, that person is much, much more passive. They're not directly involved in the action. They're taking a bird's eye view, they're observing it. So our physical perspective, our physical point of view dramatically affects how we might write, the stories we might write. Now, it might be that our position is psychological. Maybe we feel skeptical about something, critical about something, sympathetic about something. Crucially though, when you answer this question, the first thing you're going to talk about are the different perspectives of the writers, the point from which they are writing and how they might be the same as each other and different from each other. Ideas are something slightly different. Now, I've got 5 options here for defining ideas for you. But when we talk about ideas, we're kind of saying, what's the writer saying? What do they feel or think about something? The example I gave of the 2 different writers at a music festival, what's their opinion about that music festival? What are they feeling about it? What do they think about all these people? What are they focusing on? What are they drawing our attention to? What's the big idea that the writer's trying to make us think about? Perhaps our writer who's involved is wanting us to understand the camaraderie and excitement of one of these festivals. Perhaps the writer who is more observational is asking us to reflect on the growth in popularity of music festivals over the last 20 or so years. What's the general vibe, feeling, mood or tone of the piece? How is the writer coming across? Are they enthusiastic? Are they celebratory? Are they damning? Are they skeptical? Are they critical? What are their views? What are their opinions? When you answer this question, you have to be clear in your own mind that there is a difference between perspectives and ideas. So how do you go about writing the answer? Well, let's look at paragraph 1. You always, 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 always start with perspectives. Now, often when we teach groups of students and they perhaps try their first paper 2 question 4, and they perhaps miss out on this opening paragraph on perspectives, let's say the average mark they get is 8 out of 16, half marks. Simply by inserting a paragraph before they've written anything else which deals with perspectives, immediately will add 4 marks to their answer, provided they do it well enough. So if you're somebody who is kind of languishing around 7 or 8 out of 16 for this question, one of the things we would look at first is, look, are you writing a good opening paragraph about perspectives? If you do that, you are going to write a decent answer. What you're going to do is you're going to start with an overall statement to compare. And when we say compare, we're talking about similarities and or differences, comparing these writers' perspectives, their points of view, the position from which they are writing their piece. Here's an example. Both writers provide a second-hand, passive and observational account of events. But whereas source A seems initially dispassionate before becoming emotive, source B is sensationalist and hyperbolic. Right, why is this a great opening paragraph? Well, it's a great opening paragraph for lots of reasons. First of all, look at the first word, both. Both is an incredibly powerful word when you are dealing with comparison questions, because that simple 4-letter word both immediately tells the examiner that you are comparing, because you are talking about a similarity between the two pieces. And what this student is saying is, listen, both writers, the writer of the ABBA fan piece and the writer of the article about the earthquake, are providing a second-hand, passive and observational account of events. In other words, neither of them were kind of directly involved in what was happening. They're coming at it from an outside point of view. It's also a great first paragraph though, because as well as a similarity, this student highlights some differences. But whereas source A seems initially dispassionate before becoming emotive, so there we've got a sense of the psychological perspective of the writer. Source B is sensationalist and hyperbolic, meaning they exaggerate. So great first paragraph here. Something about the kind of physical perspective or position from which the writers write, and that's a similarity, and then a difference, which is the psychological position of the two writers. If someone writes a short opening paragraph of this quality, they are already well on the way to securing for themselves a good mark. And it's all about perspectives. So now we come on to paragraph 2. And this is where you go into one of the sources. And what we're going to do now is talk about ideas. In source A, because we've done perspectives, we're now going to focus on ideas. In source A, the writer seems detached at first as Lee paints the picture of gloomy, isolated ABBA fan as it lies tucked away from sight and mind. The verb tucked has positive connotations of safety and warmth. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on this because this is now a pretty standard approach that you are familiar with. Paper 1, question 2, paper 2, question 3. What you're doing here is identifying some language-rich phrases, you're labeling your methods, you're quoting, you're zooming in on the effects of specific words, you're doing all the stuff that you would usually do in the order that it makes sense to do it. You're talking about the ideas that the writers are communicating. What you do next is you compare the ideas. So contrastingly, similarly, however, on the other hand, the writer in source B, and then you repeat step 2, but you repeat it, of course, for the second source. Now, what you would aim to do in this question is do 1 or 2 more of these types of paragraph. So you've got your introductory paragraph on perspectives, You've then got a kind of half paragraph on source A, half paragraph on source B. If you did that again, another half paragraph on source A, another half paragraph on source B, you'd be putting yourself in a position where, if you've done it well, you would be capable of getting 16 out of 16 on this question. Sorry, I don't know why that's just suddenly come up. Here's a model for you. Now it says at the top, annotate together. Not actually going to do that now, but this is a great activity for you to do. Go through using what we've talked about and annotate why this is a particularly effective model. Then ask yourself, what would go in paragraph 3? And the suggestion here would be that you have a go at writing paragraph 3 if you haven't already done this in a lesson, and then take it to your teacher for them to have a look. Things you might have found from the two sources that you wanted to talk about. Well, here are a list of them. The purpose, one's about empathy, one's about sensationalism. The seriousness of it, one's very emotive and heartfelt, one's a bit flippant, quite comedic, alarmist in places. One of them suggests shame, one of them tries to attack scientists who don't know enough. Both of them are observational, but one of them, the Aberfan, is very much limited to that place, Aberfan, whereas the article goes all over the place, looks at different parts of Great Britain. Both are third-person narrative accounts. One is a non-chronological description with shifts in tense and focus. There are shifts in both between action and reflection. We've talked a bit about the tone and the mood already. Lots of use of emotive imagery in source A. It's a very literary piece. Rhetoric is used much more in source B. In other words, the language of persuasion, rhetorical questions, rules of 3, inclusive pronouns, and all that kind of stuff. If you want more practice, then the way to do that is to go onto your Teams pages, find some past papers which your teachers will have put on there, complete some of those questions, and then please do take them to your English teachers who'll be happy to have a quick look at them and tell you if you are on the right tracks. Thank you very much.